Okey diyoruz. En son ne oldu? Kvot yeni hocasıyla tanıştı. Veşet, Hammer dedikleri. İşte bunlar havadan sudan konuştular. Sonra Veşet Kvot'a dedi ki bana uzunca bir dal parçası bul ve ilk dersimize başlayacağız dedi. Kvot gitti bir tane esnek ama böyle uzunca, çok da kalın olmayan ama ince de olmayan bir dal parçası buldu. Beşiktaş'a verdi. Beşiktaş bunu öyle işte havada birkaç kere salladı falan. Böyle işte o dalları hızlı bir şekilde salladığım zaman çıkan whip whoop whatever seslerinden çıktı. Sonra dedi ki işte ben sana bununla vuracağım. Dersimiz bu, haberin olsun gibi bir şey dedi. Kvot böyle bir şey yapmadı demedi falan. Sonra Kvot'un etrafında çember çizdi bir süre, hala vurmadı. Sonra Kvot'un beklemediği bir an iki kere vurdu. İkisi de ilk böyle en başta hiçbir şey hissetmedi Kvot ama sonra da ikisinin acısı şiddetli bir şekilde Kvot'a geldi. Sonra bir kere daha vurdu. Sanırım böyle ilk ikisinde Kvot bir şekilde ses çıkarmadı. Yani böyle acı çektiğine dair bir işaret vermediydi. Ama üçüncüsünde en son canı çok acıdığı için çünkü çok sert vurdu. Üçüncüsünde özellikle Kvot da işte bağırdı falan. Sonra Kvot'a dedi ki ben seni sevmiyorum, ben sana güvenmiyorum. Sen bir Barbarian'sın. Seni burada istemiyorum. Buradan pılını pırtını toplayıp gideceksin falan. Benim aklıma şey geliyor. Yani Fight Club'da Project Mayhem, yanlış hatırlamıyorsam adı, ona eleman alıyorlardı. İşte orada oradaki insanlara aklına gelecek en kötü şeyleri söylüyordun. Git buradan, sana ihtiyacımız yok. Şişkoları istemiyoruz, sarışınları istemiyoruz, çocukları istemiyoruz. Aklına gelen her türlü şeyi söylüyordum, mazereti. Ama o kişiler yine de kalmaya devam ederlerse bir süre boyunca en son alıyordun. O da zaten Budizm'den mi ne etkilenmiş. Benim bildiğim işte Budizm mi, bir şey vardı böyle içinde yoga yapılan böyle bir kung fu vari bir şeydi yanlış hatırlamıyorsam. Bunlarda 3 gün 3 gece işte beklemen gerekiyordu. Açsız susuz gram kımıldamadan, tam Fight Club'daki gibi, Fight Club'daki o gibi daha doğrusu. İşte 3 gün boyunca hala oradaysan onlar seni içlerine alıyorlardı. Yani burada tam o varmış gibi bir his var. Kıvat geldi, Kıvat'ı düpedüz dövdü. Aşırı iğrenç bir hareket. Seni istemiyoruz. Ben senin hocanın ve tek dersimizde böyle olacak falan. Aşırı kötü bir durum. Neyse sonra Kıvat dedi ki eğer ben gidecek olursam Tempi'ye ne olacak diyordu. Sonra birden suratına vurdu sopayla. Ki bir insanın suratına vurmak kadar adice bir şey yok diyoruz. Gerçekten sinir bozucuydu oraları okuması da. Sonra Kıvat'ın dudağının sağ tarafının mı sol tarafının mı ne üst kısmı, ya şurası ya da şurası oluyor sanırım, kızardı falan. Direkt suratında bir yara izi oluştu ve o yara izinden de Kıvat'ın ilk derste başına gelen şeyin ne olduğu etraftaki diğer insanlar tarafından anlaşılabilir bir durumda. Not cool diyoruz. Günde 3 kere buluşacağız dedi yanlışım yoksa. Üçünde de dersimiz böyle olacak. Bundan sonra sen gidene kadar böyle yapmaya devam edeceğiz, dedi Kıvat'a. Sonra Kvot gitti. İşte ilk dersi bittiği için yemek yemeye gitti. Sonra işte böyle kimse bunun yanına gelmiyor falan. Ama herkes buna bakıyorlar, bunu görüyorlar. Yaralı ilk dersinden hocasının bunu patakladığını anlıyorlar falan. En son birisinin karşısına oturduğunu hissettik. O da ha dedi, sonunda içlerinden bir tanesi cesaret edebildi yanıma gelmeye. Kafasını kaldırdı, baktı işte Karkeret, bu bunu sevmeyen suratı yaralı kadın. Bu işte Kvot'a konuşmaya başladı. Seni bağırırken duydum, kız çocuğu gibi çıkıyor sesin, ya da kız çocuğu deme de çocuk gibi çıktı sesin falan yaptı. İşte herkes iddiaya girdi. Bir gün bile duramayacağını düşünüyorlar. İşte ben de öyle iddiaya girdim. Eğer duramazsan 2 talent kazanıyor. Ya da işte 2 talent yatırdım, 4 talent kazanıyor. Whatever. Eğer gitmezsen senin çığlıklarını dinlemeye devam edeceğim. İki türlü de ben kazanıyorum falan. Düpedüz Malfoy Harry Potter'a neyse Kvot'a o diyor. Karkaret. Claude sustu sustu sustu, en son dedi ki sessiz bir şekilde ama bir şekilde de etrafındaki insanların duyabileceği bir şekilde, buna whisper diyor, yani böyle sahne fısıltısı, fısıltı olan ama etraftaki insanların da duyabildiği bir şekilde dedi ki köpek gibisin, konuş konuş, bir türlü bitmedin gibi bir şey etti, çok böyle hoş bir şekilde. Karkaret böyle bir şey diyemedi çünkü bir şey demeye devam ediyor olsa köpek gibi konuşmaya devam etmiş olacaktı. Quote'un lafını onaylamış olacaktı. Kod düşündü ki en azından hiç yoktan iyidir. Bir kişiye karşı zafer kazandım mücadelemde. Sonra fark etti ki Vashit'te olan yenilgisinin yanında bu yenginin hiçbir anlamı yok falan. Ama sonra hiç yoktan iyidir falan diye düşünüp devam ettik diyoruz. Sonra orada yine bölümün içindeki bölüm bittiği gibi bir şey oldu ve Veşit'in ikinci dersine Kıvot'u beklerken gördük. Veşit geldi, o demek ki daha pes etmedi, demek ki yavaş öğrenenlerdensin. Hadi git bana bir dal parçası bul. Ama eğer işte benim istediğim gibi bulmazsan ben kendi dal parçamı bulacağım, haberin olsun. Kıvat sonra birden çıkardı tahta eğitim kılıcı, aşırı ağır bir şey, aşırı sert bir şey. Kıvat düşündü ki bununla benim omzuma vursa kolum kırılır, bununla benim kafama vursa çenem kırılır falan. O derece tehlikeli. Yani böyle tahta sopa bulma olayında o tahta eğitim kılıcı kadar kötü bir şey yok diyor. Hani en şiddetli silahı bulmuş oldu. Sonra birden üstünü çıkarmaya başladı Kıvat. Veşit dedi ki işte beni baştan mı çıkarmaya çalışıyorsun? Senin tatlı olduğunu reddetmiyorum ama o kadar da tatlı değilsin falan yapıyordu. Sonra kod arkasını döndü, gösterdi ki sırtını, işte ben üç tane böyle sırtını gösterdi ve sonuçta üç tane üç, üç kere kırbaçlandın ben dedi. Sonra böyle bekledi Veşit'in bir yorum yapmasını. Ha böyle Veşit dedi ki işte kırbaçlanmışsın sen, ben senin hırsız olduğunu biliyordum zaten. İşte aynı şekilde ne diyordu bölümün başında, sen bizim işte sırlarımızı çalıyorsun, sen bizim yeteneklerimizi, özelliklerimizi, bilgimizi çalıyorsun, sen bir hırsızsın falan yaptıydı. Kod dedi ki "Hayır, ben hırsız değilim, bunları üniversitede yedim. Üç tane kırbaç vurdular bana" dedi ve orada beklemeye başladı. Bir şey söylemesi lazım Veşet'in. Eğer onu söylerse Kvot kafasında kurduğu stratejiyi daha da geliştirecek uygulama açısından bekliyor. En son Veşet Kvot'un istediği şekilde sordu ama burada daha fazla kırbaç izi var. Veşet onu sordu. Büyük ihtimal Kvot ilk kırbacını üniversitede yediyse bile ikincisini hırsızlığından dolayı yedi. Onu kanıtlamış olacak. Aklı sırasınca diyoruz. Sonra Kvot anlattı ki ben bir kere daha yedim. Normalde insanlar bir kere kırbaç yediği an benim okulumda okulu bırakıp başka bir okula gidiyorlar. Sessiz bir şekilde, ama ben durdum. İkinci sefer kırbaç yedim, yine durdum. İkinci sefer 6 tane. 6 kere kırbaçlandım ama yine durdum çünkü benim öğrenmek istediğim şeyler vardı okulda ve ben de kırbaçlandığım halde durmaya devam ettim. Lafı şeye getiriyor. Hani beni acıyla caydıramazsın. Artı Tempe'nin güvenini ihanet etmeyeceğim hiçbir şekilde. Hani eğer beni cidden caydırmak istiyorsan acıdan başka bir yöntem bulman lazım dedi. Tahta kılıcı uzattı, gözlerini kapattı, beklemeye başladı. Reşat ne yapacak? Orada kaldık. Okey, başlamadan önce başka diyecek bir şey var mı düşünüp geliyorum. Chapter 113, Barbarian Tongue. I like to say I kept my eyes closed, but that wouldn't be the truth. I heard the gritty sound of dirt beneath the soles of vicious shoes and couldn't help but open them. I didn't peek. That would only make me seem childish. I simply opened my eyes and looked at her. She stared back, making more eye contact than I would get from Tempe in a span of days. Her pale grey eyes were hard in her delicate face. Her broken nose no longer looked out of place. It was a grim warning to the world. The wind swirled between us, raising goose flesh on my naked arms. Bridget drew a resigned breath and shrugged, then flipped the wooden rod to grip the handle end. She held it thoughtfully with both hands, getting a feel for its weight. Then she brought it up to her shoulder and swung, except she didn't. Fine, she said, Harmony finally Diaz, exasperated, throwing up her hands. You twiggy little skid. Fine, shit and onions. Put your shirt back on. You're making me cold. I sank down until I was sitting on the bench. Thank God, I said. I started to put my shirt back on, but it was difficult as my hands were shaking. It wasn't from a cold. We should so I do it, she said triumphantly, pointing a finger at me. You standing there like you're ready to be hanged. I knew you were ready to run like a rabbit. She stands her foot in frustration. I knew I should have taken a swing at you. I'm glad you didn't, I said. I managed to get my shirt on, then realized it was inside out. I decided to leave it rather than drag it across my stinging back again. What gave me away, she demanded. Nothing, I said. It was a masterful performance. Then how'd you know I wasn't going to crack your skull open? I told it true, I said. If Shaheen had really wanted me driven off, she could have just sent me packing. If she wanted me dead, she could have done that too. I rubbed my sweaty hands on my pants. That meant you were really meant to be my teacher. So there were only three sensible options. I held up a finger. This was a ritual initiation, a second finger. It was test of my resolve. Or I was really trying to run you off. We had finished as she sat on the bench opposite me. What if I'd been telling the truth and thumped you bloody? I shrugged. At least I'd have known. But it seemed like long odds that Shaheen would choose someone like that. If she'd wanted me beaten, she could have let Karkaret do it. I cocked my head out of curiosity. Which was it? Initiation or test of resolve? Does everyone go through this? She shook her head. Resolve. I needed to make sure of you. I wasn't going to waste my time teaching a cupboard or someone afraid of a little smack or two. I also needed to know we were dedicated. I know that. That seemed the most likely. I thought I'd save myself several days of wells and force the issue. But it gave me a long look, curiosity plain on her face. I will admit, I never had a student offer himself up for a vicious beating in order to prove he's worth my time. This was nothing, I said nonchalantly once I jumped off a roof. Yeah, Dios. We spent an hour talking about small things, letting the tension between us slowly bleed away. She asked how exactly I'd come to be weird, and I gave her the bones of the story, glad to have the chance to explain myself. I didn't want her thinking of me as a criminal. We should examine my scars more closely afterward. Whoever tended to you certainly knew their physics, she said admiringly. This is very clean work, as good as any I've ever seen. I pass along your compliments, I said. Her hand brushed gently along the edge of the hot bath that ran across the whole length of my back. I'm sorry for this, by the way, ama yine de yaptın diyoruz. It hurts worse than the whipping ever did. I tell you that for free. It'll be gone in a day or two, she said, which isn't to say you won't be sleeping on your stomach tonight. She helped me settle my shirt, then moved back to the other bench facing me. I hesitated before saying, no offense, Bashir, but you seem different from the other Adam I've met. Not that I've met many, mind you. You're just hungry for familiar body language, she said. There is that, I said, but you seem more expressive than the other Adam I've seen. I pointed at my face. Bashir shrugged. Where I'm from, we grew up speaking your language. And I spent 4 years as bodyguard and captain for a poet in the small kingdoms. He also happened to be a king. I probably speak Turin better than anyone in Harvard, including you. I ignored the last. You didn't grow up here. She shook her head. I'm from Fevant, a town farther north. We're more cosmopolitan. Harvard only has the one school, and everyone is tied very tightly to it. The search tree is one of the old paths too, rather formal. I grew up following the path of joy. There are other schools. We should know this is one of the many schools that follow the Gatanta, the path of the search tree. It's one of the oldest behind the eighth and Aratan. There are other paths, maybe 3 dozen, but some of those are very small, with only one or two schools teaching their ketan. Okay, bu durumda şeyi gördük en azından net bir şekilde. Latanta da Pell of the Search Tree falan diyorlar. Bu Search Tree Letani'nin temelinde yatan şey, Adem'in temelinde yatan şey. Bir şekilde bir ağacın kılıçlı olması falan Letani için, Ketan için çok önemli. Buradan da benim Kvot'un Şehin'e verdiği cevaplar arasında dönen yaprak dediydi Letani için. Dönen yaprak Letani'den anlar tarzı bir şey dediydi. Farkında olmadan aslında Latanta'ya gönderme yapmıştı ve oradaki herkes Kvot'un Latanta hakkında bilmediğini biliyordu. Ve Latanta bir şekilde Letani'nin temelinde yatıyor. Ademler'deki Keta'nın temelinde yatıyor. Kvot böyle direkt nokta atışı bir cevap vermiş gibi oldu orada. Ya da belki o kadar nokta atışıydı ki Şehin direkt saldı konuyu. Gerçi ondan sonra salmadı. Hani ayı takip edebilir misin diye sordu Kvot. Ondan sonra saldı ama yine de en azından net bir şekilde gördük ki Kvot'un Letani'yi bildiğini düşünüyor. Çünkü Letani'yi bilen birisini yok etmek yanlış bir harekettir falan dedi. Kvot Letani'yi biliyor. Düşünüp geliyor. Is that why your third is different? I asked. Did you bring it from your other school? Bishop gave me a narrow look. What do you know of my third? You brought it out to trim the willows, which I said. Tempe's third was well made, but yours is different. The handle is worn, but the blade looks new. She gave me a curious look. Well, you certainly have your eyes open, don't you? I shrugged. Strictly speaking, it's not my sword, Bishop said. It's merely in my keeping. It is an old sword, and the blade is the oldest part of it. It was given to me by Shehin herself. Is that why you came to this school? Bishop shook her head. No, Shehin gave me the sword much later. She reached back and touched the hilt fondly. No, I came here because while the Latanta might be rather formal, they excel in the use of the sword. I had learned as much as I could from the path of joy. 3 other schools refused me before Shehin brought me in. She is a clever woman and realized there was something to be gained in teaching me. I guess you're both lucky she has an open mind, I said. You more than me, Veshit said. There's a certain amount of one-upsmanship among the different paths. When I joined the Latanta, it was a bit of a feather in Shehin's cap. It must have been hard, I said, coming here and being a stranger to everyone. Bishop shrugged, making her third rise and fall on her shoulder. At first, she admitted, but they recognized talent, and I have that to spare. Among those who studied the path of joy, I was viewed as rather stiff and stodgy, but here I am seen as somewhat wild. She grinned. It's pleasant, like having a new set of clothes to wear. Does the path of joy also teach the litany? I asked. Precious Lord, it is a matter of some considerable debate. The simple answer is yes. All Adams study the litany to some degree. Those in the schools especially. That said, the litany is open to a broad interpretation, but some schools cling to others pure. She gave me a thoughtful look. Is it true you said the litany comes from the same place as laughing? I know that it is a good answer, she said. My teacher in the path of joy once said that very thing to me. Bishop frowned. You look pensive when I say that. Why? I tell you, I said, but I don't want you to think less of me. I think less of you for keeping something from your teacher, she said seriously. There must be trust between us. I sighed. I'm glad you like my answer, but honestly, I don't know what it means. I didn't ask you what it means, she said easily. It's just a nonsense answer, I said. I know you all plays great story in the Latini, but I don't really understand it. I just found a way to fake it. We should smile indulgently. There is no pretending to understand the Latini, she said confidently. It is like swimming. It is obvious to anyone watching if you really know the way of it. A person can pretend to swim too, I pointed out. I simply been moving my arms and walking on the bottom of the river. She gave me a curious look. Very well then. How have you managed to fool us? I explained spinning leaf to her. How I had learned to tip my toes into a light, empty, floating place where the answers to their questions came easily. So you have stolen the answers from yourself, she said with mock seriousness. You have cleverly fooled us by pulling the answers from your own mind. You don't understand, I said, growing irritated. I don't have the slightest idea what the Latin really is. It's not a path, but it helps choose a path. It's the simplest way, but it is not easy to see. Honestly, you people sound like drunk cartographers. I regretted saying it as soon as it was out of my mouth, but wished merrily loud. There are many drunks who are quite conversant with the Latin, she said, several legendarily so. Seeing I was still agitated, she made a motion to call me. I don't understand the Latin either, not in a way that can be explained to another. The teaching of the Latin is an art I do not possess. If Tempe has managed to instill the Latin in you, it is a great mark in his favor. But she leaned forward seriously. Part of the problem is with your language, she said. Turin is very explicit. It is very precise and direct. Our language is rich with implication, so it is easier for us to accept the existence of things that cannot be explained. The Latin is the greatest of these. Harika bir nokta. Şurayı düşüneceğim az sonra. Can you give me an example of one other than the Latin, I asked? And please don't say blue or I might go absolutely mad right here on this bench. She thought for a moment, love is such a thing. You have knowledge of what it is, but it defies careful explication ki bunun örneğinin tıpatıp aynısını Elodin de verdi. Blue'yu verdiği gibi yanlışım yoksa. Elodin'den kaçamazsın kanka diyoruz. Love is a subtle concept, I admitted. It is elusive, like justice, but it can be defined. Her eyes sparkled. Do so then, my clever student, tell me of love. I thought for a quick moment, then for a long moment. Rashid grinned. You see how easy it will be for me to pick holes in any definition you give. Love is the willingness to do anything for someone, I said, even at detriment to yourself. In that case, she said, how is love different from duty or loyalty? It is also combined with a physical attraction, I said. Even a mother's love, I should ask, combined with an extreme fondness, then I amended. And what exactly do you mean by fondness? She asked, with a maddening calm. It is, I trade off, racking my brain to think how I could describe love without resorting to other equally abstract terms. This is the nature of love, Bishop said. To attempt to describe it will drive a woman mad. That is what keeps poets scribbling endlessly, where if one could pin it to the paper all complete, the others would lay down their pens, but it cannot be done. She held up a finger, but only a fool claims there is no such thing as love. When you see two young ones staring at each other with dewy eyes, that it is. So thick you can spread it on your bread and eat it. Çok güzel dedi. When you see a mother with her child, you see love. When you feel it royal in your belly, you know what it is. Even if you cannot give voice to it in words. Bishop made a triumphant gesture. Thus also is the litany. But as it is greater, it is more difficult to point toward. That is the purpose of the questions. Asking them is like asking a young girl about the boy she fancies. Her answers may not use the word, but they reveal love or the lack of it within her heart. How can my answers reveal a knowledge of the litany when I don't truly know what it is I asked? You obviously understand the litany, she said. It is rooted deep inside you. Sipping mind Dios, bro. Too deep for you to see. Sometimes it is the same with love. But reached out and tapped me on the forehead. As for this spinning leaf, I have heard of similar things practiced by other paths. There is no Arthurian word for it that I know. It is like a katan for your mind. A motion you make with your toes to train them. She made a dismissive gesture. Either way, it is not cheating. It is a way of revealing that which is hidden in the deep waters of your mind. The fact that you found it on your own is quite remarkable. I nodded to her. I bow to your wisdom, Bishop. You bow to the fact that I am inarguably correct. She clapped her hands together. Now, I have much to teach you. However, as you are still welted and flinching, let us forbear the katan. Show me your academic instead. I want to hear you bound my lovely language with your rough barbarian tongue. I learned a great deal about academic over the next several hours. It was refreshing to be able to ask detailed questions and receive clear, specific answers in return. After a month of dancing about and drawing in the dirt, learning from Veshet was so easy it felt dishonest. On the other hand, Veshet made it clear that my hand language was embarrassingly crude. I could get my point across, but what I was doing was at best baby talk. At worst, it resembled the rantings of a deranged maniac. Right now, dur devam etmiyoruz. Right now you speak like this. She got to her feet, waved both hands over her head, and pointed to herself with both thumbs. I want to make good fight, she gave a wide, insipid grin. With surge, she thumped her chest with both fists, then jumped into the air like an excited child. Çok aşırı tepkiler veriyorsun diyor sanırım. Come now, I said embarrassed. I'm not that bad. You're close, Bridget said seriously as she sat back down on the bench. If you were my son, I will not let you leave the house. As my student, it is only tolerable because you're a barbarian. It is as if Tempe brought home a dog that can that can whistle. The fact that you are out of tune stands quite beside the point. Bridget made as if she would get to her feet. That said, if you're happy speaking like a simpleton, just say the word and we can move to other things. I reassured her I wanted to learn. First, you say too much and you speak too loudly, she said. The heart of Adam is stillness and silence. Our language reflects this. Second, you must be much more careful with your gestures, she said, with their placement and timing. They modify specific words and thoughts. They do not always reinforce what you say. Sometimes they run purposely counter to your surface meaning. She made 7 or 8 different gestures in quick succession. All of them said amusement, but each of them was slightly different. You must also come to understand the fine shades of meaning, the difference between slim and slender, as my poet king used to say. Right now, you only have one smile, and it cannot help but make a person look a fool. We worked for several hours, and wish it made clear something Tempe could only hint at. Ne diyor anlamadım. And wish it made clear something Tempe could only hint at. Okay. Düşünüp geliyorum. Hani bunu nasıl anladığımı anlatacaktım size ama nasıl anlamadığımı anlatamayacağımı fark ettiğim için devam ediyor. Ethereum was like a wide, shallow pool. It had many words, all very specific and precise. Academic was like a deep well. There were fewer words, but they each had many meanings. A well-spoken sentence in Ethereum is a straight line pointing. A well-spoken sentence in Adam is like a spider web, each strand with a meaning of its own, a piece of something greater, more complex. I arrived in the dining hall for supper in a considerably better mood than before. I was still stung, but my fingers told me the swelling on my cheek was much reduced. I, sit, I still sat alone, but I didn't keep my head down as I had before. Instead, I watched the hands of everyone around me, trying to note the subtle shades of difference between excitement and interest, between denial and refusal. After supper, Roshet brought a small pot of salt which she smeared liberally across my back and upper arms, then more sparingly on my face. It tingled at first, then burned, then settled down to a dull, numb heat. Only after the pain along my back faded did I realize how tense my entire body had been. There, Rashid said, twisting the stopper back into the bottle. How is that? I could kiss you, I said gratefully. You could, she said, but your lip is swollen, and you would doubtless make a mess of it. Instead, show me your keten. I hadn't stretched, but not wanting to make excuses. I fell into open hands and began to move slowly through the rest. As I've already mentioned, Tabby usually stopped me when I made the slightest mistake in the keten. So when I reached the 12th position without interruption, I felt rather smug. Then I misplaced my foot badly in grandmother gaiters. When Veshit said nothing, I realized she was merely watching and withholding judgment until the end. I began to sweat and didn't stop until I reached the end of the keten 10 minutes later. After I'd finished, Veshit stood stroking her chin. Well, she said slowly, it certainly could be worse. I felt a flicker of pride until she continued. You could, for instance, be missing a leg. Then she walked in a circle around me, looking me up and down. She reached out to prod at my chest and stomach. She gripped at my upper arm and the thick muscle above my leg. I felt like a suckling pig brought to market. As she took hold of my hands, turning them over to examine them, she looked pleasantly surprised. You never fought before Tempe taught you? She asked. I shook my head. You have good hands, she said. Her fingers running up my forearms, feeling at the muscle there. Half of you barbarians have soft, weak hands from doing nothing. The other half have strong, stiff hands from cutting wood or working behind a plow. She turned my hands over in her own. But you have strong, clever hands with good motion in your wrists. She looked up at me questioningly. What do you do for a living? I'm a student at the university where I work with fine tools, shaping metal and stone, I explained. But I'm also a musician. I play the lute. But it looked startled, then burst into laughter. She let my hands fall and shook her head in dismay. A musician on top of everything else, she said. Perfect. Does anyone else know? What does it matter? I said. I'm not ashamed of who I am. No, she said. Of course you're not. That's part of the problem. She drew in a deep breath and let it out again. Okay. You should know about this as soon as possible. It will save us both trouble in the long run. She looked me in the eye. You're a whore. I blinked. I beg your pardon. Pay attention for a moment. You're not thick. You must have realized there are huge cultural differences between here and where you grew up in. Ya şurada şey yapıyor. Where you grew up in yapıyor. Quote söyleyecek diyoruz. The Commonwealth, I said. And you're right. The cultural divide between Tempe and myself was huge compared to the other mercenaries from Vintas. She nodded. Part of that is because Tempe has fewer bits than tits, she said. And he's as fresh as a baby chick when it comes to making his way in the world. She waved a hand. All that aside, you're right. There are huge differences. I noticed, I said, you don't seem to have a nudity taboo for one thing. Either that or Tempe is a bit of an exhibitionist. I'd be curious how you found that out, she chuckled. But you're right. Strange as it may seem to you, we have no particular fear of a naked body. Rashid looked thoughtful for a moment, then seemed to reach some kind of decision. Here, it will be simpler to show you. Watch. I watched the familiar Adam impassivity slide over her face, leaving her face blank as new paper. Her voice lost most of its inflection at the same time, shedding its emotional content. Tell me what I mean when I do this, she said. Bishop stepped close, making no eye contact. Her hand said, respect. You fight like a tiger. Her face was expressionless, her voice flat and calm. She grabbed hold of the top of my shoulder with one hand and gripped my arm with the other, giving it a squeeze. It's a compliment, I said. Bishop nodded and stepped back. Then she changed. Her face grew animated. She smiled and met my eyes. She stepped close to me. You fight like a tiger, she said, her voice glowing with admiration. One of her hands rested on the top of my shoulder while the other slipped around my biceps. She squeezed. I was suddenly embarrassed at how close you were standing. It's a sexual advance, I said. Russian stepped away and nodded. Your folk view certain things as intimate, naked skin, physical contact, the nearness of a body, love play. To the other, these are nothing remarkable. She looked me in the eye. Can you think of a single time you have heard one of us shoot, raise our voice, or even speak loudly enough we can be overheard? I thought for a moment, then shook my head. That is because for us speaking is private, intimate, facial expression too. And this, she pressed her fingers to her throat, the warmth a voice can make, the emotion it reveals, that is a very private thing. And nothing carries more emotion than music, I said, understanding. It was a thought too strange for me to cope with all at once. We should know that gravely. A family might sing together if they are close. A mother might sing to her child. A woman might sing to her man. A slight flush rose on Vesh's cheeks as she said this, but only if they are very much in love and very much alone. But you, she gestured to me, a musician. You do this to a whole room full of people all at once, and for what? A few pennies, the price of a meal. She gave me a grave look. And you do it again and again, night after night, with anyone. She shook her head in dismay and shuddered a bit, while her left hand unconsciously clenched in rough gestures, horror, disgust, rebuke. It was rather intimidating, getting both sets of emotional signals from her at the same time. I thought of the mental image of standing naked on the stage of the Julian, then moving through the crowd, pressing my body to everyone there, young and old, fat and thin, each noble and penniless commoner. It was a sobering thought. But prelude is the 38th position in the cat, and I protested. I was grasping at straws and I knew it. And sleeping bear is 12th, she shrugged, but you will find no bears here, or lions, or lutes. Some names reveal. The names in the Ketan are meant to hide the truth, that we may speak of it without spilling its secrets to the open ear. I understand, I said at last, but many of you have been out in the world. You yourself speak utterly beautifully and with much warmth in your voice. Surely you know there is nothing inherently wrong with a person singing. You have been out in the world as well, she said calmly. And surely you know there is nothing inherently wrong with having sex with three people in a row on the broad heart of a busy inn. She looked me in the eye pointedly. I imagined the storm would be rather rough, I said. She chuckled very well. Assumed they had use of a blanket too. What would you call that person? If she'd asked me 2 spin ago, when I'd been fresh out of the fair, I might not have understood her. If I'd stayed with Felurian any longer, it's entirely possible that having sex on the heart wouldn't have seemed odd to me. But I'd been back in the mortal world for a while now. A whore, I thought silently to myself, and a cheap and shameless whore to boot. I was glad I hadn't mentioned Tempe's desire to learn the lute to anyone. How ashamed he must have felt for such an innocent impulse. I thought of a young Tempe wanting to make music but never telling anyone because he knew it was dirty. It broke my heart, to be courteous. My face must have given away quite a bit because Weshit reached out to grip my hand gently. I know this is hard for you folk to understand. So much harder because you have never even entertained the possibility of thinking otherwise. Caution. I struggled with everything this implied. How do you get your news? I asked, with no troopers wandering from town to town. How do you keep in touch with the outside world? Bushett smirked a bit at this and made a gesture to the windswept landscape. Does this seem to be a place that concerns itself overmuch with the turning of the world? She dropped her arm, but it is not so bad as you think. Traveling, peddlers are more welcome here than in most places. Thinkers doubly so, and we ourselves travel quite a bit. Those who take the red come and go, bringing news with them. She laid a reassuring hand on my shoulder, and occasionally a rare singer or musician will travel through, but they do not play for a whole town at once. They will visit a single family. Even then, they perform while sitting behind a screen so they cannot be seen. You can tell another musician because when they travel, they carry their touch screens on their backs. Her mouth pursed a bit, but even these are not viewed in an entirely favorable light. It's a valuable occupation, but not a respectable one. I relaxed a bit. The thought of a place where no performer was welcome struck me as profoundly wrong, sick even. But a place with strange customs I could understand. Adapting to fit your audience is common as changing costumes to the Tamaru. We should continue. This is the way of things, and you would do well to accept it sooner rather than later. I say this as a well-traveled woman. I have spent 8 years among the barbarians. I have even listened to music in a group of people. She said this proudly with a defiant tilt to her head. I have done it more than once. Have you ever sung in public? I asked. Richard's face went stony. That is not a polite question to ask, she said stiffly, and you will make no friends with it here. All I mean, I said quickly, is that if you tried it, you might find it is nothing shameful. It's a great joy to everyone. Richard gave me a severe look and made a hard gesture of refusal, finality. Quote, I have traveled much and seen much. Many of them here are worldly. We know of musicians, and to be completely forthright, many of us have a secret, guilty fascination with them. Much the same way your folk are enamored with the skill of the modern courtesans. She gave me a hard look. But for all that, I will not want my daughter to bring one home, if you catch my meaning. Neither will it improve anyone's opinion of Tempe if others knew he had shared the katan with such as you. Keep it to yourself. You have enough to overcome without all of them knowing you're a musician on top of everything. Chaos. Chapter 114, his sharp and single arrow. What the hell is that? I don't know. Kapatmadan önce diyecek bir şey var mı düşünüp geliyorum. Nope. Hadi görüşürüz.